3, 2, 1.
You are here, and Mr. Litkenhouse will be absent this evening. And we are starting the audio feed, so we can.
Yeah, it's 7:29. Michael Starr and Leslie also confirmed they can verify the 3 cable stations.
Great.
I wasn't
Thank
sure if
you
Mr.
so
Duncan
much.
knew the video was sideways on his last on.
Oh, he likes it that way. No. Did you hear that, Mr. Duncan?
And Celeste, we have confirmation from FCC TV, video and audio's live, so you should see it momentarily.
I have audio, but I don't have video yet on the Granicus side, so they may want to flip that switch as well.
Okay, Michael.
I know everybody wants to see the city council's smiling faces, so we're going to wait for the video if folks are listening in right now. Can hear us, but can't see us yet. Ah, there we go. All right, Mr. Mayor, we are ready to go.
All right, well, let's call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Monday, July 26, 2021 meeting of the City Council. We're pleased you're joining us this evening. Madam Clerk, would you like to read the virtual meeting notice, or the Assistant City Manager, whoever might wish to do that?
Sure, I'll take care of that this evening. This meeting was posted and is being held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of City Council are present at this meeting through electronic means, and members of the public can view the meeting at www.fallschurchva.gov/council meeting and on FCC TV Cox 11, RCN 2, and Verizon 35, as well as on the City of Falls Church's YouTube channel. Public comments were accepted virtually, and people were invited to sign up to speak via the video platform at www.fallschurchva.gov/public comment. Written public comments, including those regarding public hearing items sent in advance of the meeting, were accepted at cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov, and they were sent to City Council daily and are summarized and presented during the written comments agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you also call roll, please?
I will. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Litkenhouse is absent. Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you may, wherever you might be, if you could please join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's move on to the receipt of public comment. Madam Clerk, will you summarize the written comments, please?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Mr. Jeffrey Cowan Jr. wrote to follow up on his concerns about a food truck that was located at the intersection with South Washington Street. Mike Dolan suggested that the city adopt a plastic bag ban if permitted under state law. And Jean Gresco wrote to ask when city council meetings would reconvene in person. And those were our written comments.
Thank you. Are there any public comments? Anyone who's present right now who'd like to speak?
No, we didn't have anybody sign up this evening, and we do not have any public hearings tonight.
All right, let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests that anyone would like to make? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Related to the public comment we got about the plastic bag ban, I understand from the city attorney we don't have that authority, but we do have the authority based on what the General Assembly passed in 2020 to enact a 5-cent tax. And so I wanted to gauge kind of the group's reception to actually considering such an ordinance, especially in the context of kind of a regional approach, because I hear that Fairfax County is considering one for adoption this fall. I believe Alexandria is moving behind that. So I think this is a place kind of like our firearms ordinance where I think a regional approach makes sense, especially if we can deploy that revenue towards environmental cleanup efforts and other things.
All right, thank you. Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. Did we ever do a field trip to examine the varied choices of lumens for lights? Is that something that's going to be discussed in Cindy's CIP report?
I don't know. Cindy or Mr. Shields?
It will be, and I'll just note, just to respond quickly to your question, our intention is to have LED lights installed at a specific location in the city so we can get feedback on the lumens, the brightness, the relative coolness versus warmth of the light, etc. And the date for that, Mr. Bradley is, I think, on this call, or Cindy may know the date in which that pilot is intended. Cindy or Zach, do you know?
Defer to Zach, who's coordinating with Lionel.
Yes, I can take that, Mr. Shields. So those work orders for the pilot program are going to be submitted to Dominion in early August. So that should be upcoming here in the next couple of weeks. How long it takes Dominion to get out there, I could not speak for them. What I can say is that compared to other communities, they've had about a 6 to 8 week lead time, depending on how long it takes to get the new luminaire heads in. So I would think that would be a fair translation to us as well. So I would say probably new heads being installed sometime in October, thereabouts. So hopefully that's satisfactory for now.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure I hadn't missed it.
And as relates to that issue, I wonder if we could also get some information about the possibility of having the capacity to drop the lights brightness down at certain hours like Arlington does. For example, the intersection at West and Great Falls is quite bright. I know there's been some issue with that brightness, but other jurisdictions have the capacity to drop the lights down at a certain time, like 11 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock, et cetera, so they're not as bright to nearby residents. So I would just ask if you would consider that. And as relates to Letty's comment earlier, Wyatt, if you could just sort of give us an update on what other jurisdictions are doing as relates to plastic bags at an upcoming meeting, that would be helpful. Let's move on to Ms. Hiscott and then Mr. Snyder.
I wanted to support Letty's comment and following that plastic bag tax and trying to work regionally to do that and everything we can on the environmental front. So to your point, Mayor, if we can continue to hear how others are moving forward, and I vote we move forward to do that as well if we can get it to fit within the region.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder?
Sure, and I'll ask the city manager about how we're addressing the food truck issue that's come before us on several occasions. And on the bag tax, while I don't object to it, I think it's very important. I know that on a number of occasions, Harris Teeter doesn't really have an alternative. They've got paper bags, but they're impossible to, sometimes they're very difficult to manage for people who have to walk a number of blocks. Likewise, I think the farmer's market is offering plastic bags only. So before we adopt this, I think we ought to make sure that there are alternatives. And I know people can bring their bags, the reusable bags, and I know that's out there, but I do want to make sure that paper bags are widely available before we move in to impose this tax. I certainly support the notion of reducing plastic bags in general, but I think we want to make sure that we communicate that our businesses are aware of it well in advance, that it gives them time to provide alternatives. That's the major thing for me, because I think the whole objective is not to raise money. The whole, although the money would be used for environmental purposes, the objective is to not have any more than absolute necessary plastic bags. So I would ask, it's not so much what we do, but rather how we do it, and we make sure that, again, that our businesses are able to provide alternatives, both at the farmers market and our regular for-profit businesses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other council comments before I move on? All right, let's move on to the report of the city manager, Mr. Shields. Oh, Letty, did you have another comment?
Sorry, I did. I was just slow on the hand raising. I don't know whether you all heard, but the VA, I think, is one of the first government groups to announce that they're requiring their employees be vaccinated, as well as, I think, New York municipal workers, and I think California has several cities as well. Wyatt, I wanted to see whether you've heard anything in Virginia, and then what our current approach is in Falls Church. Are we requiring vaccinations, encouraging vaccinations, and then once we get into the fall, when kids are going back to school, especially now with the Delta variant increasing, are we requiring or suggesting that unvaccinated workers have some sort of weekly or biweekly COVID test before coming to work?
Okay. So thank you for the questions, and if we're ready for the city manager's report, I will address some of the comments or questions that were posed tonight. The majority of the city manager's report tonight, however, will be dedicated to an update for the city council on our capital improvements program. We do this on a quarterly basis just to have good transparency and accountability on our accomplishments in the CIP realm. And so I will turn that over to Cindy. But before we do have that more detailed discussion, let me just touch on a few of the questions. First, yes, we will schedule a work session to discuss what the region is doing with respect to the 5-cent plastic bag tax. So we'll schedule that at the next mayor's meeting. In terms of the food truck complaint that was raised by the city council at the last meeting, the city zoning administrator did contact that vendor, and I believe that activity has ceased. And just for the public's awareness, in the city's ordinance with respect to mobile food vending, we do allow them in the city. They are allowed on private property, however, they're not allowed on public streets. And this ordinance was adopted about 2 to 3 years ago after a significant amount of public input, work with the Chamber of Commerce and with food truck vendors. And that one sort of piece of regulation to have them not on the public street, but on private property, was intended as a way to somewhat self-regulate it, where a landlord or a property owner would be, to some extent, managing the vendors and making sure that they're getting their health inspections and getting licensed by the city. So I wanted the council and the public just to be aware of that one measure. And there's a desire, as I believe there was a discussion at the EDC last week on food trucks, we could have a more detailed discussion on that in the future. And then lastly, with respect to vaccination, we will have Colin Brody join us from the health department at the council's next regular session on August 9th. At the present time, the city does not have a mandate for vaccination amongst its workforce. It is strongly encouraged, and we do everything we can to set a positive example for it, including, some of the pins we have on our badges that just note, that we've been vaccinated. We've also ordered some of those for the public as well, and those are we will be publicizing those, and they're available now as well. The situation is dynamic. We do have rising cases, of course, nationwide. It's being discussed extensively, but in the Northern Virginia region, we're seeing rising cases as well. and vaccination is proving to be very effective. Again, for keeping those, for protecting people, and certainly for mitigating severe health impacts. However, there are cases of vaccinated people getting the virus and spreading it. And so internally, I'll just let the council know, we have put out a communication to city staff just to remind staff of our own internal rules that in public areas, we are asking that staff wear a mask. And so that would be in the public hallways and at the public counters. For the public that comes into the building, we have the same standard that you see just about everywhere, which is the CDC standard that if you're vaccinated, you're not required to wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, we ask that you do wear a mask. So that is the current state of play, but we are watching it very closely, and we know it's a changing situation. And I do believe, I'm hopeful that more and more people will step forward to get vaccinated as we get closer to this fall. We're also working to have a vaccination mobile clinics at our upcoming public events. More to come on that if we're successful in getting a mobile clinic at the Tenor Hill Blues Festival or the Fall Festival and other big gatherings where we can make it easy for people to get vaccinated and make that good choice. So with those brief updates, let me now turn it over, unless there are any questions for me, I will turn it over to Cindy Mester, and we will do a summary of a very detailed written report on the update for our capital improvements program, and also an update to the City Council on our grant applications. Ms. Mester.
Thank you, Mr. Shields and Council. Really appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on our capital improvements program. As we know, it's a very robust program that really is focusing on reinvesting in our community and achieving a lot of council's goals and visions in the comp plan. I do want to thank the staff that helped me pull this together for you all. It is definitely a teamwork, particularly for the documents before us this evening. Carrie Odanino and Caitlin Sosby has been a very helpful part of our team members to pull this together. As Mr. Shields indicated, it's a lot of information, and so I'm not going to go into a deep dive on all of the materials, but wanted to highlight a few things. Staff's goal is to make sure that council has this information as a resource. And the same is true for the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission has been much more engaged throughout the year on their role within the CIP. And so at their last meeting, they received an update on the grant application schedule, which we've included in council's packet this evening. And then in their next meeting, they will get council's update on the snapshot, the CIP project update, so we can make sure that both bodies are equally informed on our good CIP work. As we looked at some of the projects that we'll touch base on tonight, I wanted to highlight, and some of the changes in state funding, I wanted to highlight that we continue to keep that equity lens in the forefront, and so a lot of our work has certainly been in the South Washington corridor of the city. We're also actively engaged with input with the Planning Commission and the Environmental Services Council on how we can build the environmental lens into the next CIP process. So for a few highlights, I'll touch base on the snapshot, the projects, and some state funding issues, the grant schedules, and staff welcome any input or questions from tonight, or if staff, council would like a deeper, more detailed follow-up at a future work session, we're glad to do that as we build towards the fall, which seems to be quickly approaching to build the next 6-year CIP. So starting with the snapshot, sort of where are we with those active projects? It's very exciting to say that we have 5 projects that were completed, and the next quarterly update will actually come off the list. And for the first time since we really started this process, there are no reds on our stoplights. So we've got a lot of green, blues for completion, and a couple yellows, but no reds this time. One of the things I did want to highlight and just remind all of us is sort of where we were with the state's 6-year improvement plan, which they referred to as the COVID SIP, which was adopted last year, which did have a lot of constraints on revenue. The new SIP that was just adopted is better, but it's still conservative, and staff is continuing to monitor the revenue and the forecasts that we're getting from Richmond. And that will be an important feature that will work together both from a CIP standpoint and the legislative committee as we go into the 2022 General Assembly session. But a couple highlights that I'll mention now in the line 41 of the staff report and the charts. We had several of our revenue sharing grants, 4 of them really get pushed out because of the COVID revenue constraints. And in that process, they also spread it out over multiple years, so we never actually got the dollars we needed till several years out and actually ability to issue a contract. So in working with the Central Office of VDOT and the Assistant Secretary of Transportation, we got 2 of our intersection projects back on schedule with no delay, which was important to time it with other funding and projects we were working on. The other 2 were delayed, but that was within the schedule we had planned for the CIP, and because we were able to bring some other grants forward, specifically the 2 from NVTA, as council just recently approved the resolutions for the Park Avenue and the Shreve Road, very important grant projects, are now going to be in 2022 instead of 2024. So we kind of swapped as a way of keeping important projects moving forward, but knowing that we had some financing constraints with the state. In the end, it balances out the staff resources well from a workload perspective, and I think also make sure we can do projects at a quality level. Few, get them done, few, get them done, instead of many in active states that we can focus on well. You'll see in the staff report, there's some, for us, fortunately, just a nominal reduction in our STP funding, and it's spread over a couple years, so we'll accommodate that through our bridge inspection program. And on line 71, we have highlighted some of our recent accomplishments, and in particular, the Northwest and Great Falls partnership with Fairfax County, completing that intersection and having a nice ribbon cutting and photo op there. One other thing I'll highlight that we worked on in partnership with the state to make sure our State of Good Repair bridge project stayed on track. This one is for South Oak Street Bridge, and that one had also been delayed due to the COVID 6-year improvement plan, the SIP. And in order to keep that ongoing, because they put the money in the out years and we couldn't contract, we are actually piloting with VDOT this time to have them manage to administer the construction part of the project. We have gone through right-of-way and design at the city level, but we would have to wait 4 years till we had enough money accumulated to do the construction contract. VDOT's budget's much bigger, so they can float it and issue the contract now. So DPW and CPEDS are working right now to get that memorandum of understanding worked out. And when we finish the right-of-way, which we're close to, we'll be able to proceed with that for the bidding and then construction. That's really important because it ties nicely into the Greenways Down neighborhood traffic calming program, as well as Southway South Oak. So it'll make for a good corridor work. It'll be a nice pilot for us to see how this works because it will relieve some staff administrative pressure for construction so we can work on other projects. But the design, and we'll still have PM control, will still be local. So I wanted to highlight that was a way that we could keep that project on schedule. Attached to the staff report is, of course, our traditional snapshot with the color symbols and a quick synopsis of where we are on all the projects, and be glad to entertain questions that you might have on a specific project. A couple highlights. Of course, we're very excited where the library renovation expansion project is, and we're looking forward to that one being completed and ribbon cutting soon. On the facility reinvestment, we do have quite a bit of HVAC and air quality work that we need to do. So as we are working with it from a CIP project, we'll continue to also assess how ARPA funding can help with that. We made great strides on the Fire Station 6 projects, their CIP. We've got windows, HVAC, sewer lines done. And we have the funding appropriated for their bay doors, but we've retained that on hold due to COVID and haven't issued the debt yet. And we're kind of just monitoring those recoveries, and we'll continue to work with the city manager and the CFO on the timing for that. After this one big project, then we'll go into a regular reinvestment with the fire station at a $150,000 per year and not have big backlog of capital projects. A lot of exciting things happening in transportation. And as we all see as we drive around the city, South Washington Transit Plaza and street improvements has definitely got sidewalk work going on. The pork chop free right turn has been removed, and we're working towards intersections. Granite for the Transit Plaza has been selected, and next week the project manager and staff and I will be starting to look at the proof for the history panels where you've all seen the text previously, so it's becoming a reality finally, so very exciting. Also, we hope to have construction the fall of 2021 for the South Washington South Maple intersection. Those are two key projects, as I mentioned, for our equity lens perspective. Oak Street Bridge is in the snapshot, and I've also already mentioned that for the funding, and it really means we're keeping the project on, and some good work on Broad Street multimodal improvements that we're working at 60% plans now, and Hawk Street design is done, and we're finishing up right away, and hopefully have procurement for construction advertised this fall. So good stuff there. Already with Mr. Duncan's question on LED streetlight, we've touched base on that. Lionel is the project manager for that, and we've done a lot of site visit and good coordination and planning on that, but of course he'll be picking that up full steam as we wrap up the library. The other thing I'll just note that you do have in your packet is the information that we provided to the Planning Commission on where we are on current grant applications that we're submitting. A lot of these are planning for things that are in the CIP, but more in out years. So we have the steady flow of funding, but also a steady workload, work plan. One of the things that we are a little concerned with, and will continue to advocate with the state as they recover revenue for transportation, is not having the revenue sharing projects pushed out by 6 years, because that was always something that was available every 2 years. So you could be a little bit more nimble when a project came up, and it's a 50-50 match. So if we have our 50% available, having them push out their 50% just means the project's delayed. So we're hoping, and other localities are aligned with that, that we'll be able to proceed there. And I'm not going to go through the grant applications or the delivery schedule in particular, but glad to answer questions. We are very pleased that in the next grant cycle for Smart Scale, that we were successful with our South Washington bus stop expansion and access to transit grant application. Now this is FY26, so this is where we're starting to plan ahead and be able to finish out corridors. But we have successfully had that approved in this current state SIP, and that's $6.4 million. And that was a great partnership, both in the design work with Fairfax County staff and then coordinating with the Providence District Supervisor, neighbors, and community on both the city and the county side. So a lot of material, a lot of good work, and tried to give you enough details, but not too much. And as I said at the outset, staff would be glad to have a follow-up work session and/or answer questions this evening. And Zach Bradley is here with me as well to help with any questions, and/or we'll follow up if we need to get some more specifics for council. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you. Our first question is from Letty Hardy, followed by Mr. Snyder. And if you're not speaking, please be muted. I'm getting a bit of an echo. But Letty, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Cindy. I always love these CIP updates, so thank you for the latest. It's good to see progress all around. Two questions. One, starting with the revenue sharing changes. So I understand obviously the impacts due to COVID revenue impacts and delaying kind of what we can do, but do we think that the upcoming federal infrastructure bill, if that passes, could help bring some of these projects back, or maybe even some state money? And then if not, I'm particularly concerned that Park Avenue reconstruction is pushed out 7 years, and then the Broad and Spring intersection is 4 years. And those are two areas in particular, I think, that have seen a lot more traffic and will continue to do so, especially with Founders Row opening this fall. And so I'm just concerned that those are pushed out many, many years out. And if there's any flexibility for us to look at other projects, just to make sure that those areas get prioritized and get those pedestrian and transportation improvements in sync with where we're seeing increased car and ped traffic.
Very good points and questions. A couple things. I think the infrastructure bill has high potential if it gets passed. As Council will recall, we were successful in getting a request from Congressman Beyer put in there for the multimodal pedestrian, which is sort of an umbrella that would certainly help in these areas. And depending on which program, may have no or just a little bit of matched money, unlike revenue sharing that's 50-50. I do think that there should be improvements in the transportation money when we go into the 2022 General Assembly session. They're certainly seeing and projecting surpluses now in their general fund, but also their transportation fund. And I think that'll be something that we can join through with VML on the Transportation Policy Committee to make sure we continue. While they've done a lot of good work at the state level for transportation funding, we got to deliver on that omnibus plan and recover from COVID. And I think that can be something both from the VML and the next legislative packet that you all have, something we could advocate for.
And so if the state money and federal money don't turn out, do we think this is the schedule we have to live with, or is there flexibility across projects so we can prioritize areas that have had more pedestrian and car traffic?
From a state revenue sharing, this would be the schedule and how we'd have to play out the money now. Because we've prioritized projects that were already in design, or we had other grant funding and which we didn't want to lose. That said, where we have local money, which is limited and may not be ARPA eligible because of what we talked about for Category C, we could look at local funding trying to reshift.
Thank you. I think it's just an important lens for us to keep in mind is, where we have obviously a lot more, development happening and more pedestrians, those are places that we want to make sure we have commensurate investments too.
And that's consistent with, while we know we have needs for North Washington, for example, we're not putting grant applications or current projects there because you don't have as much redevelopment. We have some traffic, signals that were already in place, but a lot of them are out years because we want to focus on Broad and South Washington. So
Great.
Excellent points, and I'll make a note.
Thank you. One more while I've got you. The Broad Street kind of hawk signals. During the past 18 months, we've obviously seen a lot more pedestrian traffic, especially in this past summer with everyone being out and about. I see a lot more people attempting mid-block crossings. When do we expect actually construction to happen for those 3 new hawk signals along Broad Street?
All right, I'm pulling up my schedule, because I think we're ready to go to construction this fiscal year's Zach, could you provide any more specific details, or we could follow up?
No, I can provide some specific details. Bear with me as I try and turn my camera on.
I always hold my breath when I see people kind of dart across Broad Street, and I think those hawk singles can't come soon enough. So.
Yes, no, totally agree. So we did just finish up right-of-way acquisitions within the last month and a half. I can't remember the exact date, but that is finished, and we are preparing the IFB. We'll need VDOT approval on that, but once we get VDOT approval, we'll be able to advertise and award and start construction. VDOT approvals on IFBs have taken anywhere from 3 to 4 months to 9 to 10 months. We have not seen a 9 to 10 month one in a couple of years now, so that's positive. So they have been turning them around much quicker, but I can't put a date on a VDOT turnaround time. But I would say 3 to 4 months at the latest. Once I guess once we have right away, which was about a month ago. So a few more months and we should be able to advertise if all goes well.
Great. And this was at Oak, Berry, and then one other mid-block. Is that right?
Fairfax.
East Fairfax. I believe it's East Fairfax.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
And so, Zach, to
Snyder?
kind of get to construction, that's probably looking spring of 2022, if we're doing advertising in the fall of 2021.
Yes, I think that'd be best case scenario. Once we award and a contractor schedules it up, it would be probably mid to late spring of next calendar year.
Mr. Snyder?
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. It takes a lot of teamwork to get this thing done on the transportation side of things. So thank you for all the staff work. Question about the bike path work. That's part of it's unusable now. Can you give us some sort of a timeline on that? I know it became more complicated as the work went on, but I suspect folks are going to want to know, do we have a rough timeline for completion of that project?
Certainly. Zach, would you like to take that one?
Yes, I can run with that one as well. So we did meet with Nova Parks early last week, I believe it was, in regards to coordination with our Trammell Branch pipe and how that would impact the not the completion, but the coordination between our dual trails crossings and kind of what that means for the current path being built. And Nova Parks' tentative goal is to have that done in the next 2 to 3 weeks, is what they were communicating to us then. I believe the only hangup they had at the time was they had run into some unsuitable soil and they had to remedy that, which should be taking place this week if all goes well with their contractor and getting them on site. And then they had about a week and a half or so of pavement to do. So next couple of weeks is kind of what Nova Parks had alluded to.
Okay, that's great. And to clarify, that also includes the stormwater work that goes underneath it. Is that right?
Yes. So the phase 1 of Trammell Branch, I'll call it, which is the box culvert immediately under the dual trails, is complete. We finished that up a couple of weeks ago. Our phase 2, we are working through some of the finer details. I hope to give council a better update here in the next couple of months. But phase 2 will consist of picking up the pipe where we ended it and running it down parallel to the trail project and tying in down near Little Falls to 4 Mile Run. We will be able to stay off of the trail with that, with minimal rework to what Nova Parks has done in terms of grading some of the vegetation and whatnot. We will not have to impact the trail though.
Thank you.
Ms. Hiscott?
Letty had most of my questions answered. I just have a quick question for something that I just didn't quite understand back on the fire station bay door, that debt issuance hadn't been authorized because of COVID-19. Is that, I didn't understand the linkage between debt issuance and COVID-19 on that specific project. Just want to make sure I understood.
Certainly. Thank you. Yes, you've captured it. The budget had been approved. It was designed to be debt issuance, but when we held all the debt just to watch the revenues from COVID and the impact locally, that's one of the debts that was put on hold.
And just indefinitely until next round of?
It would be tied into a next logical round that's sufficient on fees, and I've been working with the CFO and Wyatt. I don't know if you have any additional updates. We were kind of, monitoring the revenues and the projections before issuing the next debt timing. That one's $550,000 to do all 10 doors, so it's a pretty large debt issuance that we would want to combine with stormwater or one of the other efforts.
And in speaking with the CFO, we are going to try to present a plan of finance to the city council where we don't issue any debt this fiscal year, and we either use ARPA money or city funds to accomplish basically all the CIP items, including those bay doors.
Thank you. And one other quick question on the stormwater improvements. There were 2 projects, and the second, which is Midvale, it said it was canceled due to easement issues. How does that impact, or does it tie into the other 6 larger projects? Is the one that's addressing that neighborhood going to help with that flooding that's coming from that direction, I guess, as you could say? I'm forgetting the name of the right branch at the moment.
Zach?
Yes, I can take that one. So that project was completely separate of the Harrison Branch project. I believe the Harrison Branch project picks up at I can't remember the address, but the bend in Midvale closest to Columbia, I'll say. And that Midvale project was the idea behind it was to do a swale to help redirect water rather than towards a house or a garage through a backyard. I'm kind of following the natural terrain of how that storm pipe runs. The homeowners were not amenable to having a swale in their backyard. And given that it did not impact, the flooding occurrences did not impact anybody else around them, it was a mutually agreed upon kind of cancellation between us and the homeowner.
Okay, so it doesn't tie into the flooding that's continuing on down on Columbia and all the way over to the Columbia and Underwood
Correct.
government property. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. That's it for me for the moment.
All right, Vice Mayor Conley, then Mr. Duncan.
Thanks, Mayor Tarter, and thank you, Cindy, for this really thorough description of these projects. There's so much that's going on. It's really impressive. My question is about the Oak Street Bridge, which I thought was going to happen sooner. It looks like it's happening a little later. Can you just tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure. Let me start with sort of the funding piece and then allow Zach to add to the project piece a bit. So the project did get delayed because when the full costs came in and design, we needed additional funding. We had applied to the state, had been approved for SGR, State of Good Repair. We were actually the only bridge project approved in Northern Virginia. And then COVID hit and the revenue shortfall for the state hit. And so they had really pushed out and delayed from a funding cycle the SGR money for South Oak Street Bridge. We still had the dollar amount, but they did small amounts every fiscal year, which precludes us from issuing a contract if we don't have the funds appropriated. So worked with the Commonwealth, the Secretary, the Assistant Secretary, and Central VDOT to get them to try to fund it earlier, but because we were the only SGR project in Northern Virginia, there was no swapping or flexibility, and hence why we're proceeding with the pilot effort to have VDOT administer the construction for us. While that was all going on, we did still proceed with design work, and we had some right-of-way pole issues and changes that we needed to do. So we've now sort of realigned construction to finishing the right-of-way now. There is some good work, I think, that will definitely help, as I mentioned, Greenways Down and South Oak, South Lee, NTC projects. And of course, we have the elementary school in between. And there is some pedestrian bridge and stormwater pieces associated to this project. So Zach, do you want to highlight just a little bit of what's involved in this project? You know, the right of way, the poles, and then the good outcome.
Yes, no, thanks for the lead in. So that's kind of the funding situation. I will note, because of COVID, VDOT did have a very small delay in authorizing the right-of-way phase of the project, maybe 4 to 6 weeks at most. But once we did do that, once we received that, we did immediately move into right-of-way. I will tentatively say that right-of-way is complete. The reason I say tentative, we had 3 easements that were needed. 1 resident signed off. The other two residents opted not to grant an easement. But we have come up with a workaround that, I guess the short version means we don't need easements from the other 2 property owners. So we're going back to VDOT with that revision right now. Once they approve that, we will be formally done with right-of-way. So that should come in the next few weeks. Once we hit that milestone, as Ms. Mester mentioned earlier, we are going to transition that project to VDOT for kind of project oversight and administration. And I'll be honest with the council, this is a first for us, so I don't have a feel for timeline or how long that will take. But what I can say is it will be significantly quicker than waiting for the funding to become available and us proceeding in our typical fashion. We do realize it's a high important bridge. We are very motivated to get rid of it. There is a special inspection coming due on it. And we would rather have that bridge under construction sooner rather than later. As we all know, it carries a bridge rating of it's either 15 or 20 tons. For reference, the legal load limit that it should be able to carry is 40 tons. So it's definitely deteriorating and we need to get it replaced. And I guess I'll leave it at once we coordinate with VDOT and we kind of hand the project over to them, we should be able to get a better time frame, and we can certainly report out and follow up on the rest of that question.
And one additional thing to note, during this process, the U.S. Coast Guard has changed the permitting process for navigable waterways, and all of a sudden this is now deemed navigable and we have to have it reviewed. So we're trying to push that currently, because it's like, excuse me, unless we're floating down, you know, rubber ducks or something, it's not the traditional navigable waterway that we might think of in layman's parlance. So we're also working that concurrently. So as always, construction, infrastructure projects have nuances, but this one also will be important as part of our stormwater to underpin the support that's supposed to be under that bridge, plus the weight.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
So much for the little city. Wow, we've got navigable waterways now. I feel like the mayor's going to want to be like called Admiral here before too long.
We'll just run some trout through it, so we'll make Mr. Lickenhouse happy.
There you go. There you go. 2 questions. Thank you, Cindy and Zach. Not related, but I'll pose both and then let you speak to them if you can. One, the other night at the Planning Commission, Chair Krasner mentioned some utility poles, as I understood it. You guys will know about this, at the corner of Lincoln and West, as I understood it, that Brent described as either unused or vestigial or redundant or some such. And yet apparently the removal of those must wait for perhaps the project you were talking about earlier, or other monies to become available, or other utilities to do something. So that's one question, that one in particular. And are there other situations in the city where we have redundant utility lines or utility poles that could be removed if we could find the resources? And 2, where are we on 5G in the city? I know a lot of jurisdictions are getting, repeater antennas scattered all around. Are we seeing that here, or is that in the works? Should we be expecting that to come down the road soon?
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Let me start with the first and then have Zach add to that, and then we'll come back to 5G. So this specific poles, I'll defer to Zach, but what we often see is when we underground the power lines, and if it's a Dominion pole, they sort of top it and the communication lines are still there. And so from Dominion's perspective, they've abandoned it, they've moved off of it. And they have, especially with the residential area or in our CIP, funding to underground. But if the communication lines aren't funded to go underground, they stay there. And so that's one of the challenges we have with the strategic residential underground. Everybody gets excited, the power lines are going underground, and we still have the poles left. That's why with a lot of our CIP projects, or all of them, if we're doing underground, we budget for the power and the communication. So Cox, Verizon, RCN go underground as well. Zach, let me check with you to see if you know the specifics on this intersection. Paul did report that out from the Wednesday meeting, but haven't had a chance to investigate it. Do you know offhand, or we'll take it as a follow-up?
No, I think we'll have to take that one as a follow-up.
In 5G, early on, we got a smattering of people pinging us to get permits and come in. And then when we had the down tree in line over on Roosevelt, we learned that there was a 5G vendor in the city. So it seems to be picking up again. I see a lot of traffic because of the ARPA money and the broadband stuff. But Wyatt, I'll check in with you to see if you've heard anything from zoning, permitting, or we can take that one as a follow-up.
So we do get permit applications for 5G installations on Dominion's poles or Verizon's poles, and under state law, we're obligated to process those permits. We have gotten some requests to place 5G on city infrastructure, and we have not agreed to that. And that is a policy question we took up with the city council maybe several years ago. We could have a follow-up discussion just to review the state of state law on that. It is something where the General Assembly was frankly quite tilted towards trying to help the utility companies roll out 5G, and really tied the hands of local governments in terms of our ability either to collect revenue for the use of our right-of-way or to regulate it in other ways. And so generally in Northern Virginia, jurisdictions are processing the permits, and they receive a very small fee for them.
All right. Anything else on the city manager's report? Okay, let's move on then to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk, will you call the first item?
Yes, we have a first reading of TO 21-12, ordinance to vacate an approximately 656 square foot drainage easement. I lost it. Which traverses the property known as 504 Randolph Street, RPC number 52-608-003, from the western border to the northeast corner.
All right, Mr. Shields.
So, Council, this is a pretty simple item. We have a historic easement, which we do not use, and the property owner has asked us to vacate it. And elsewhere on his property, we do actually have an easement that we do use for stormwater conveyance. There is a plat attachment 4, which very clearly shows the easement that we're being asked to vacate. Cindy, I don't know if you can put that up on the screen. Mr. Bradley is handling this item along with the city attorney. Mr. Bradley, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but this is a fairly simple ask of the city council.
Just real briefly, I would add that this project relocated this storm sewer line, I believe 2010. We have no vested interest in the easement being vacated, which is hashed out on the screen right there, as the new pipe does run along the property line out to Randolph Street. So that's all I have to add to that. It is staff's recommendation to proceed forward and move to a second reading on September 13th, I believe.
All right, seems pretty straightforward. Any questions or comments? Any public, Vice Mayor Conley?
Just a quick comment or question, Mr. Can you put that map back up, Mr. Bradley? I see the hashed area there at 504 Randolph. What about the property next door? Does that also have an easement?
To be honest with you, Vice Mayor, we are looking into that. It's a very odd subdivision in the way it was divided with easements. We believe it's there. We have not confirmed. The reason this one is before the council tonight is the residents have reached out and specifically asked us to take care of this one. I believe they want to do something with the property and it's standing in the way. So we need to further research lot 42A.
All right, yeah,
Okay.
go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and check on that as well? If it's not used, maybe on your own accord, you can go ahead and take care of that.
It looks like it's a larger lot and there's an empty portion there where there is no building, so. Just
All right,
curious.
well, yeah, nonetheless, if you can clean it up for somebody, I think we ought to go ahead and do it. Any public comment, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Any other comments? Or do we have a motion? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move the
I'm-
grant first reading
Grant.
to TO
Go ahead, Mr.
2112. I move to grant first reading to TO 21-12, schedule public hearing and second reading for September 13th, 2021, and advertise the same according to law.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Any further comment? Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes,
Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much.
All right, next item.
And we are on to the consent items. I think there's only one on there this evening.
All right, Mr. Shields.
The consent item was discussed at work session and is a request for authorization of the city purchasing agent to execute a contract or to purchase up to $325,000 per fiscal year for information technology solutions. These are, our PCs and software and maintenance and support from the company of CWG. This is a cooperative procurement where we're riding one of our adjacent communities' contract.
Okay, any comment? If not, do we have a motion?
Whoa.
You can't just make a motion to adopt the consent items since it's on consent.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
All right, do we have a second?
Snyder seconds.
All right, nice work. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes,
and Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
The motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to business not on the agenda. And recall, we do have a closed session tonight. Any business not on the agenda, any standing committee reports or other reports that folks would like to give to the rest of council? All right, let's move on to the closed session. I'd like to take a short recess or break between that so they can get the cameras down and take a short break. I'm going to go ahead and read the motion. Time is 8:27. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Snyder.
Snyder and seconded by Council Member,
Hiscott.
let's go with Hiscott. And passed by a vote of City Council, Council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, issues relating to the West End property. Vice Mayor Connolly,
Yes.
Councilmember Duncan,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Lichtenhouse is absent. Hiscott,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
Tarter, yep. All right, so let's go ahead and take a 5-minute recess or 5-minute break while I take the cameras down or we get in a closed session and reconvened in closed session at 8:33.
Okay, and I will send you to the breakout room.
Thank you, Celeste.
All right.
And Celeste, if you'd confirm when you see on Granicus the slide deck up.
Yes. Sorry, I'm charging my phone across the room where it's running.
I just
Hi,
clicked my.
Cindy. I'm seeing your desktop, I believe, on the.
Yep, I minimized it for session, so thank you for reminding me. And FCC TV has said we are back up, so when you see us on Granicus, advise the mayor.
All right, so we got a whole lot of people with their mics still on, so if you can mute yourself, maybe that echo will go away. We are back. I believe we're back in open session, or at least open in our meeting right now. We're going to take a motion to come into open session formally, and so I'm going to ask that motion right now. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Snyder.
And seconded by Council Member Hiscott, and passed by a vote of City Council, Council reconvened in open session. Vice Mayor Connolly.
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Duncan.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Lichtenhouse is absent. Hiscott.
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
Tartar. Yep. All right, it is 8:58. This is a certification. Upon a motion made by Councilmember
Snyder.
and seconded by Councilmember Hiscott, and passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the body. Vice Mayor Connolly?
Yes.
Councilmember Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse is absent. Hiscott?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Tartar? Yep. All right, we are in open session, just coming out of closed session. I guess I would ask, is there anything anyone would like to say on council? Any comments or questions after coming out of closed session?
Mr. Mayor, I had a couple questions for the city attorney.
Please.
Could you briefly describe what it is and why we're doing it?
The city's considering entering into an agreement with Fairfax County that will resolve some disputes as to the exact interpretation of the voluntary boundary adjustment agreement. That adjustment agreement was entered into in 2013, back when at the end of the water sale litigation, and it brought the high school property under the jurisdiction of the city. So this would be a brief agreement that will permit the project as proposed by the developers currently to move forward, with the understanding that both the city and the county agree that the area for the project complies with the boundary adjustment agreement.
Okay, and does it in any way reduce the land area of the current project in front of us?
It does not. In fact, it takes the land area for the project as reflected in the most recent subdivision, and with the increase of the 0.3 acres, and both parties agree that that configuration and that acreage complies with the boundary adjustment agreement that the parties entered into years ago.
Okay, and does it limit the types of the configuration of the buildings and the other elements within the general area in the agreement?
It does not. It does not affect at all anything within the boundaries. It simply provides that the parties agree to those boundaries and some other provisions like notification to each other and things like that.
Right. And finally, would you say that the effort here is to work cooperatively with Fairfax County in order to move this project forward?
It is. It's an attempt to reach a resolution so that we don't have to continue sort of quibbling over the details, and to reach a resolution that will allow this project to go forward with the developer in the way that the developer has proposed it to date.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the county attorney or for the city manager? Okay, is there anything else anyone would like to discuss before we adjourn tonight? We have a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, move to adjourn.
All right, do we have a second?
Snyder seconds.
Snyder, all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. We're adjourned. Everyone have a great evening, and we'll see each other very soon, I'm sure.
Have a good evening.
All right.
Everybody,
Thank you.
good night.
Thank you,
Thanks,
council.
everybody.
Stay
Good night.
safe.
Good night, Celeste. Bye.
We have a motion to adjourn.
I do like the breakout room.
All right, do we have a second?
What's that?
I like the breakout room for
Yes.
doing closed session.
Guys,